shock and anger and all of those things that you go through when someone you love dies. And I was in London when I heard that Wes had passed. And you know, Heather, myself, many of us, we thought that Wes had a bad broken leg. And when you get old, you know, you break a hip or a leg, it's big rehab. And I knew that Wes was at, you know, in Cape Cod, because I'd run into some fans that had cornered him at a book signing and at a panel with, of all people, Salman Rushdie. So it was like, Wes, I mean, what was that about? But I loved it. I wish I was there. And Wes had done these wonderful signatures on some really amazing, valuable Nightmare on Elm Street memorabilia. And I thought, what I'll take with me is that Wes was walking his beautiful new wife and his dogs on the beach and doing rehab with a cane. That's what I thought and what I hoped was happening. And we didn't know that he was as ill as he was. So I haven't even dealt with denial or any of the other stages that you go through when someone you respect passes. You know, there's a commercial on right now for Mitsubishi, and it's a young father who's going to hand over the old Mitsubishi to the daughter, go away to college, and he's going to get a new car. He's going to get a new Mitsubishi. American capitalism. And, or Japanese capitalism. But the guy in the commercial is Wes at 35. It's amazing. He's a ringer for Wes. And Nancy, my wife's over here, she knows we were going to call him and leave messages and tease him and emails, and we never did it. And I regret that. I would love to have teased him. You know, at the end, I didn't know. And so,
I don't think anybody did. You know, I had seen him just 6 months before that.
And he was producing television.
Yeah, he was producing, and just as loquacious and as conversational. But you've had that link from the earliest times in your career. I mean, we've talked about this before. The first time I ever saw you work was in Buster's Billy. But it was not so long after that. I mean, this really changed the course of your professional life.
Well, you know, it's interesting. This is the kindest, gentlest man in the world, except he has a great dark taste that I love. Nobody treats Stephen King better than Mick Garris. But no, what happened with Wes was, I was kind of goody two-shoes until Wes got a hold of me. And I'd done a lot of work. I was the best friend and the sidekick and the pal. And I'm confident that I still would have been doing that, but on a kind of old Burgess Meredith, you know, kind of character actor way, and not as busy as I am now, because of what I've sort of inherited as a result of staying true to the horror and science fiction and fantasy genres. But Wes did open that door for me, and I will always owe him for that.
Well, in a way, it's what happened with Anthony Perkins. You know, Anthony Perkins was a young star. He was often a sidekick, or he had hit records out, and then Alfred Hitchcock cast him in Psycho. And it was the best thing and the worst thing that happened in his career. In your case, I think it's a great thing that has propelled you ever since and keeps you going. And am I right in assuming that Wes was kind of a guru for you?
I think so. You know, the great gift, and I don't know whether this is a happy accident, as we say, show business, or whether I've earned some of this, or whether Wes was responsible, or Ned Benson, the casting director, or the powers to be at New Line Cinema at the time. But here's what's happened. I was taught by Wes Craven to respect the horror genre. And I was a bit of a snob and an asshole. I was a star in the 70s, and I'd done a lot of independent cinema. I'd worked with Henry Fonda, Susan Sarandon, Jeff Bridges, Sally Fields, Wanda Cassidy, Scatman Crothers, Arnold Schwarzenegger, great directors like Bob Rafelson, and hung around with some of the Robert Altman people. But what happened to me, the great gift was Wes taught me to respect horror, fantasy, and the sci-fi genre again. And you're looking at a kid, you're looking at a guy here who was there for opening day with mom and dad for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That squid was bitching. You're looking at a kid that was there on his own with his paper route allowance on opening day of Forbidden Planet at a matinee in Sherman goddamn Oaks, Lorena Theater. You're looking at a guy who was there and saw there's a kid backstage, he's right over there, I think, with a Bad Seed t-shirt. I saw the Bad Seed by accident when that was an adult film. I saw accidental Hammer films. I saw these great films all through my life, and somehow doing Shakespeare and being a theater actor, I got away from that, and I kind of was in denial about how much that meant to me. And now that I'm older, that I don't remember the Shakespeare, although I do remember some great stuff that I've seen. And I do remember some great theater that I've seen, whether it's Alan Bates or Daniel Day-Lewis or other people. But what I'll take to my grave with me is James Mason and Kirk Douglas and Peter Lorre in Disney's, you know, the scars, the sucker marks from the tentacles of the giant squid on that sailor's face as he comes tumbling back into the Nautilus. You know, the sailors being shaken off that log in King Kong on the Late Late Show on the Fabulous 52 on CBS at 11:15 at night in LA. And I finally saw the uncut King Kong, and he shakes the sailors off that log and they fall down that ravine. I drew that for the entire third grade, trying to get that image out of me, purge that image out of me. Purging Gregory Peck. Harpoon lined to Moby Dick on his last dive, waving or beckoning the other sailors. Richard Basehart, Woody Strode, you know, to come to him as the whale sounded for the last time. And I've gotten back to that, and it's made me connect with the fans again that are younger than me, and the fanboys and the fangirls that I run into at Comic-Cons all over the world. And I realize now how important those images are to us.
And you don't have Western conventions, Western festivals, comedy conventions, comedy festivals. There's something really deep and visceral about the experience of theater and being on that roller coaster and doing it in this safely, with relative safety until you leave the theater, and doing it communally. And I think that, you know, Wes was very philosophical about it, and there wasn't anything in any of his movies that wasn't extremely well thought out in a very psychological sense. And I'm curious about how those first conversations about who Fred Krueger was with you, because it's the perfect intersection of actor and role.
Yeah, except that, you know, we didn't talk that much. Wes is very kind to me, or Wes was very kind to me in interviews about my intellect and saying that he cast me because I got it, because I was the one actor that came in front of him that got what he was saying. Truth be told, I have a thin face. Mick has a thin face. If you put makeup, prosthetics on either Mick and I, we still look normal because our faces are thinner. Our heads don't look too big for our bodies. Annette Benson may just have felt sorry for me because I've been up for every goddamn role in National Lampoon's Class Reunion. But what Wes gave me was freedom. And I mean, when Wes directed me, it was always when I did something. I would do something and Wes would do a little more of that, you know, or do a little less of that. But Wes was never giving me stuff. He sort of left me alone.
He was encouraging.
Yeah, and I remember that so well. He would always say, you know, he would say, yeah, or that thing you're doing here, would you do it tomorrow? But don't do it in this scene. But I really love it, you know, which is just a great, honest way for an actor to tell me, that's a cool thing, Robert, but we don't need it here, can you do it later on in the show? You know, oh, okay. You know, which didn't hurt my feelings and encouraged me to keep coming up with stuff. I think that's the relationship we had, but I need to say something now because he's gone, and because I missed the DGA tribute to Wes. I was out of town. The great gift that I think Wes had, and I want to share this with you because I think some of you have this still. I know Nick does too. Wes managed to keep the 14-year-old boy somehow alive in him. And I think it was easier, perhaps, for Wes than Nick and myself, who chomp a bit at being tight. The Stephen King director, the horror actor. We chomp a little bit at that. And with Wes didn't see movies until he was an adult. Except for Disney movies, he wasn't allowed. It was forbidden in his household. So Wes was Johnny-come-lately to a lot of this stuff. And I think that Wes was constantly discovering it and kept that adolescent boy, fanboy, alive in him all the way up until the end. I mean, his jokes, and the other thing, and Mick knows how this can really help on a set, especially when you're in trouble. But Wes was a double threat. Wes could fix the scene with writing as well as directing. And, you know, I shall miss that.
Well, it's one of the great things about Wes was that he was literary and in touch with both left and right brain. You know, he was very logical and practical, and yet he had a boundless imagination that in the dream world that you discovered in his first Nightmare film was expanded upon so greatly and used to such great effect. And you continued to work with him regularly in the new Nightmare, but also Nightmare Cafe and things. Was there kind of a through line that you would see? Because he was constantly evolving in such a way.
You know, I'll just do an anecdote. Maybe this will explain it. Nightmare Cafe, which was supposed to be called the Terminal Bar or Last Chance Cafe, but obviously the powers to be at NBC wanted it to be called Nightmare Cafe to exploit the incredible success of Nightmare on Elm Street, Robert Englund and Wes Craven. And we were watching Saturday Night Live one night, and Wes had been drinking, and I'd been drinking. And Jack Coleman from Heroes and Heroes Unborn and from Dynasty had been drinking with us. Jack was the other star of the show. And my wife, and we were there with, you know, what was left of the pathetic detritus of hors d'oeuvres. And so, you know, at 11:30, 11:40 at night, Saturday Night Live up in Vancouver in my apartment. And there was this dark, offbeat sketch on SNL called Head Wound Harry. A Head Wound Harry fan. It's on the internet. Those of you think I'm exaggerating now. And there's literally a dog licking the head wound. I mean, it's very dark and it's very black, but black humor. And Wes lost it. Wes was always cracking bad puns. And perhaps we'll have time to tell about another one later, but Wes started to giggle like a big old girl. And Jack Coleman lost it, and then I lost it, and my wife Nancy lost it. And Wes is huge. Wes is like 6'4", and Wes's big giant Don Quixote legs were flailing on my couch, and he lost it. He was laughing so hard he was crying at this sketch. And forever, I shall hope that part of his abandonment to the dark black humor of that sketch that he was unafraid to react to in public or with friends. Part of it was that he felt so comfortable in my crummy little apartment in Vancouver. You know, but Wes, that's Wes Craven, that he did have that dark guy in him, that dark sense of humor in him at all times.
Well-spoken.
Measured. He was measured and in control, yeah, which gave actors a great confidence and calm, very calm. But he was not. It was very difficult for him to refrain from the bad pun. You know, we're in Hollywood, so I'll tell this story because there's some business people here, and maybe I can get a giggle out of them. We were in like a force call, and we'd been working around the clock, and we had snakes, pythons, a child, and we were coming up to the second meal, second dinner, and we brought in these, along with the snakes, they brought in these eels, these albino eels, you know, to match up to the albino python. That was some satanic Freddy hell thing in the set. I forget exactly, but we were all there and we were like exhausted. We were working with a kid, and the kid's got the teacher there, and you know we got to call a break every 20 minutes for the goddamn kid. And you know we're trying to get through. And we're all hungry, and you know we're just hoping it's not going to be cold pizza from Domino's. And I remember Wes saying, "We better get on this next shot, or we're all going into eel penalty." And that's Wes Craven. Ouch. And it's not a great pun, but Wes can't control himself. He had to make that joke.
Well, you know, as a writer, I know he always wanted to be a novelist, and it was late in his career that he actually did found Society of Geniuses. He and I kind of published our first novels at the same time. And he was so supportive and so interested and so excited to have that happen. It was supposed to become a movie, but the idea of him writing without the plan for it to become a movie, but just to not think about budgets and schedules and egos and the like. Were you ever a part of the storytelling process with him in the planning of like New Nightmare or things like that? In the early stages of these things, or was it usually when there was a finished script that you would talk?
I think in part 3, part 7, and even to some degree, Nightmare Cafe, Wes sort of deferred to me because I think Les has a really good instinct about when an actor owns a role. And I say this with all due respect to writers. I'm English trained, and English trained means you serve the writer first, then the director, then yourself. American trained usually means you serve yourself first, then the director, then the writer. Unfortunately, American acting style. But and you know there's a place for some of that. But I'm English trained, so I always serve the writer first, and then the director, and then myself. And I try to find it in the writing. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
If you were part of the process.
Well, you know, I think Wes just deferred to me. And I think part of that is that Wes had great instinct in actors. I mean, we all know Wes found Johnny Depp, right? Oh, okay. But Wes also found Bill Pullman, Serpent of the Rainbow. Wes also found Sharon Stone. Wes also sat in on the casting of Patricia Arquette on Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Wes, you know, found many actors. The young actor, the actor that was in Quest for Fire, who went on to do Twin Peaks, Wes knew how to use that gentleman, and many, many others over the years. He was always Angela Bassett. Many actors that Wes embraced and used over and over again. Kyle MacLachlan. But you know, he had a great eye for talent, and I think he knew when to step back. And with me, I mean, I think he was one of the least hands-on directors I've ever worked for. You know, gosh, I just finished my 80th movie, so I've been around the block. But Wes was gentle. Wes was gentle, and you know, I can't remember Wes ever saying that sucked, or you know, even if it was too much, he gave me this great thing. He would say, you know, I kind of liked it. It's not right for here, but maybe we'll use it later in this movie, or you know, later another scene, which I love, which an actor loves.
Did you find that changed over the course of time because your careers met each other often along the way?
Well, you know, the thing that was so strange about working with him on the TV show was it was the first time I'd ever seen a laptop. So, and I was kind of intimidated. What is that? You know, that glowing thing in Wes's lap. Oh my God. But we always did it. Wes could fix the lines. But it was great having the lines fixed immediately, as opposed to the next morning. You know, that was the first line. Yes, it was great to get that instant fix. And Wes would just give you the line and then type it in, and then they'd have it. The office, the suits, whoever that needed it. That was a great experience working with him then. And that was a crazy show because every episode was very different in style. And we were kind of ahead of the cusp in American television there. Now that show would be a hit. Then the audience wasn't quite ready, but the network wasn't quite ready, you know, to tell the audience how to watch it.
We first met when we did the second episode of Freddy's Nightmares together, and we did a few of the wraparounds for some of the other shows. Wes was notably not really a part of that show, and you could sense it, you could feel that. Did he intentionally remove himself from the process? Do you know?
I was lured to the television series with a promise of getting my DGA card. That was the first part of that lure. The second part of the lure was that I was told that we were going to be on late at night, syndicated, and we could push the envelope of American television. This meant we would be the first series in the history of American television that could be a little nasty late at night, you know, and have a little bit of rock and roll fun. And I imagined us on after Saturday Night Live or Don Kirshner's rock concert, whatever was on late at night, and we'd be on, you know, late, and we could get away with some stuff. A little bit of violence, a little bit of sex, a little bit of rock and roll. And so I was lured to it. The third reason I was lured to the show was I had just done Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 with Rennie Harlan. And many of that crew had worked on 1, 2, 3, and worked really hard. And although they were always working for New Line, not all of them had, you know, hit the so-called jackpot. They hadn't moved up in their particular department yet, or they hadn't, you know, really renegotiated as a principal in their department for money. And so I brought the cream of the crop, so to speak, from Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and I said, you guys, if we do this series, you're all going to be able to buy your first house. You know, you have a baby, you can pay off your car insurance, whatever. And so a lot of that crew came with us and did the show. We were promised 10 days, and then 7 days, and then 6 days, and finally it was 4 days. You were around. And the great gift that crew did was they went over and saved a TV show that was a vanity production called Tales from the Crypt. So our crew, the crew that Nick worked with, the crew that I worked with, were the crew that went over and saved Tales from the Crypt. Because
about half the budget.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, speaking about DGA and directing, you are a director, and I would imagine that Wes was film school for you. I mean, you've worked with a lot of great filmmakers, but repeatedly with Wes, and I would imagine there was a lot to learn.
I wish, and I probably will never direct film again. It takes too much out of my life. I might do theater again. I wish I could achieve the calm that you and Wes have on the set. It's a real gift. And I also know they're crazy, nasty, rambunctious directors that produce great work that we all love. Everybody here loves. It's not the only way to work, but it's probably the best way to work consistently, especially if you're working in cable now, the new best place to be. And I wish I had the calm that you have and the calm that Wes has on the set, because it really creates a great creative atmosphere. My problem is my clock, my body clock, is set. It's been set so long, Nick, as an actor. Yeah, it's set as an actor, in and out, or I'm spoiled. You know, work around me or work with me, or I'm in and out. I'm in and out in 6 weeks. as a director, as Nick knows and you guys know, it's a year of your life. It's a year of your life. From financing and pre-production and shooting and post-production. Now, I thought I was going to love shooting the most. I thought, this is it, I'm going to love shooting and casting. Casting's excruciating for me because I'm an actor, and it breaks my heart because people come in that are infinitely more talented than others, but they're wrong for the role, but the camera doesn't like them. And you have to tell them no. The other thing that's excruciating for me is once you start shooting, that clock is ticking. But I do love post-production. I love having a scene that doesn't work, and you can put a sprinkler, a rainbird in the background, or the dog barking to fill a beat, or a mournful train whistle. Or I love post-production and mixing and all, and learning from all the editors I've worked with. But I just don't know how to plan that year anymore. You know, so I'm really not a director. I wish I was, and people tell me I should be, or they tell me I should be a writer. I'll probably do a little more writing, and I'll probably direct some theater, but film directing is a really specific, unique discipline, and it doesn't quite coincide with the way I've been sort of spoiled by Hollywood.
How would you say, what were the words that would best represent Wes's style? I mean, we're here to celebrate him, and you're the closest person to that work ethic and style that he had. Is there something that you would say distinguishes him from other filmmakers you work with?
I don't know if it distinguishes him, but I think what Wes's gift was that he was intellectually dark. He was surrealistically dark and nasty. Wes didn't shy away from blood, and he didn't shy away from violence. But that's not what he was about. He was about a story and a theme, and more than that, an undercurrent. In all of Wes's films, to me, there's this, where the serpent and the rainbow, or the people under the stairs, or there's this undercurrent. There's an undercurrent tension that he knows is there, and it's thematic. It's thematic, it's casting, but it goes along with the whole overall theme of whatever project that he's directing. Even back at the beginning, I mean, you know, if you watch Hills Have Eyes, that, you know, it's brutal, but there is a theme there, and it's like the binding agent.
There's so much more depth than what's on the surface of his movies, and we talked about that earlier. Chuck Russell, other people were here before the movie began.
By the way, just a shout out to Chuck. I don't know if Chuck's still around. You know, Chuck beat us all up in Nightmare 3. That was a hard shoot, and everything in that's a practical. It's like the pinnacle of practical effects. But you know, I just think in the history of cinema, a shout out has to be given to Chuck Russell, because for my money, for my dime, The Mask, starring Jim Carrey, really turned a corner, really lifted effects to a level that we hadn't seen before, an accomplished level that served that story. And I really think that people tend to forget that was the movie that turned the corner.
And they were effects as performance.
Yes, that really turned the corner and enabled us to watch the next movies that followed that way. So I needed to say that. Yeah.
We're going to open it up to the crowd here, but just another question or two. One thing I was curious about, do you have a favorite Craven film that you were not a part of?
Oh, I'm so happy. You know, I tried to lobby for Wes Craven's new Nightmare Tonight, along with the other film they had here, but Serpent and the Rainbow is just a great, great film, and I'm a huge fan of that film. And Bill Pullman's work in that, and I mean, that movie, you can smell that movie, and That movie makes me itch. And yeah, that movie, it's all on screen. I mean, Wes shot that movie in Haiti. And when you watch that movie, you're in Haiti.
You feel it. Well, let's open it up to some questions before the next video right here. Very rapid response.
You know, I don't have them. It's kind of awkward for me to wear those in public. Look, Freddy shoes. No.
The question was a few years ago, Nike put out
The Nike Freddy Krueger shoes. But I have signed thousands of them. Yeah. And they're really, apparently they're very, very valuable. So if you have a pair, hang on to them. I just signed a French circus size Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6 Freddy's Dead poster of me kidding around like Bob Fosse with the hat off in full makeup, full Freddy brag. And they've just given us the 3D glasses, and I'm camping around and doing kind of Bob Fosse moves. And somebody took a photo, and it was on a proof sheet that went to Paris. And some very intelligent Parisian publicity person put that on the opening day poster at the biggest theater in Paris. Giant circus-sized poster, and along the side of the poster are images from the movie in 3D, and attached to the other side are the 3D glasses. I think it sold for $8,000 in New York last year with a tear in it. So hang on to your tennis shoes.
Always Freddy. Another question right over here.
Well, you know, that's easy. Nightmare 7, and I lobbied for it to be screened here tonight because maybe it was Wes's favorite. He really got some stuff off his chest in that. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Here's why it was fun for me. I got to hang out with John Saxon. And John Saxon had Sandra Dee, Audrey Hepburn, and Natalie Wood for leading ladies. John Saxon starred with Bruce Lee. He worked for Quentin Tarantino. He starred with Robert Redford twice. Electric Horseman and a World War II movie, I can't remember it right now. He starred with Marlon Brando in The Appaloosa. He starred with Clint Eastwood in Joe Hill, with Robert Duvall in Joe Hill. He worked with everyone, Burt Lancaster, John Huston, and I would go out to lunch in Woodland Hills with John Saxon, and after a glass of wine, I'd get him to tell me an Audrey Hepburn story, or a John Huston story, or a Quentin Tarantino story, or he worked in Robert Redford's first movie. He had all this great stuff. He had Jimmy Stewart stories. He worked with everyone. He's my connection, along with Henry Fonda, he's my connection to the transitional golden age of Hollywood. And so it's oral history. And I love saying this out loud, you guys, because it's a way for people like Nick and I to tell you guys stuff that you can tell your friends, that we hear. And we're not talking about gossip now, we're talking about actual cool stuff, you know, real stuff. If I tell you a story, if I tell you that John Saxon told me that Burt Lancaster had scenes of his kind of a movie called The Unforgiven, directed by John Huston, because he looked better with Audrey Hepburn on screen than Burt Lancaster, who played her incestuous brother. It's the truth. You're getting it from the, you're getting it from the mouth, from a true source. So I love that stuff, and that was for me on Nightmare 7. In a funny little restaurant in Woodland Hills, at least once a week, I'd have these great lunches with John Saxon, and he would tell me stories about Bruce Lee, and just this great stuff.
And you worked with Dario Argento on Masters of
Dario Argento, and he was also, he hung out with James Dean, you guys, and Montgomery Clift. He was an early 50s teen star. I'll tell you guys, we're all here now, we're in LA. Just like I pictured it. I'm up doing cartoon voices at Nickelodeon, and I got time to kill, and I'm on some street in Burbank I've never been on before. My goddamn father worked up there for 100 years at Lockheed. And I'm on the street, I'm on the street with all these trees, and I go into this cinema bookstore up there. You probably, some of you know about it. And it's like books and posters, and I look, and I walk in, and I'm looking around for pictures of myself. You know, any big Wednesday photos? No. Anyway, I didn't have mantis yet. And I'm looking and I turn around to walk out, and there over the door is a massive, triple circus-sized poster of John Saxon in Speedos holding Francis Ford Coppola's First Love, Juan Anders in his arms in some movie. And it's like, I just wanted to buy it so bad for John, but John would have needed a lot in New York to put it up. But every time I saw John after, I embarrassed him with that, you know, my knowledge of that movie. On the other hand, he loved it. He loved being kidded about the fact that he, you know, had done a low-budget, you know, movie with you know, Roger Corman and Francis Ford Coppola's lover back in the middle 60s, you know. And the poster, the Italian poster at least, he's wearing Speedos. And he has a massive bulge.
I'm still kind of reeling by the fact that both our fathers worked at Lockheed.
Oh, yeah, my dad worked. My movie was coming out with Tom Hanks, the Spielberg movie. My father, you know, knew Francis Gary Powers. My father worked on the U2 and was part of that whole thing. So I'm going to be there opening day. Because that stuff's all the whispering I heard over Mom and Dad Martinis and Frank Sinatra when I was a kid. Cold War gossip.
Next question. Ready?
First off, I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to meet you. I was just wondering, I mean, Freddy films are so iconic. It's been a huge franchise. Would you ever consider going back to the studio and making another Freddy Krueger?
I think what you guys have to understand is I'm a Hollywood kid. You know, I was born minutes from here. And I understand the concept of remakes. You know, our grandparents, every movie they saw was a silent film that was remade. We forget this. It's not something new. There's only so many stories that we have to tell around the campfire. And Hollywood has to recirculate these and remake them. You guys know, some of you have kid brothers, sisters that won't go see black and white movies. There's some great black. If I could drag you to them, I could get you stoned or drunk and get you in the head. Guys, there's some black and white movies that turn you on that would blow your mind. But you won't make yourself see them, and I understand that. The new technology is phenomenal. You know, I got, you know, the walk. I just saw Zemeckis doing stuff in that I've never even seen before, and subtle stuff. And so I'm all for it too. I'm not the old fogey that you think I am. There was a prequel script to Nightmare on Elm Street circulating several years ago, and the gossip was that John McNaughton, Henry, portrait of a serial killer, that John McNaughton was attached. And I heard this from some really good sources at New Line Cinema, someone that Nick and I know, who shall remain nameless, but it was called Krueger the First Kills. And the gimmick that I loved was that Freddy kills a kid. The cops have to find him. And the cops are great characters, the two cops that find Freddy, a couple of, you know, heckle and jekyll guys, they find him. But they get him in jail, they find him, bust him, put him in jail. The villains of the piece are the lawyers that get him out. The lawyers that get Freddy out on loopholes. And then Freddy on the courtroom stairs, at the end, you know, free, you know, being arrogant in front of the news cameras. And then, of course, the finale at the end, which is Freddy as Joan of Arc being torched by the vigilante parents and other monster and the villagers. So I would have loved to have done that. This is, I'm talking now 2008. That's about when I heard about this. And it was real. But because of Platinum Dunes and Time Warner taking the franchise, or having the franchise sold to them from New Line Cinema, Nick probably knows, I mean, Nick knows these details better than I do, but it was sold, and now Michael Bay has Friday the 13th, and he has Nightmare on Elm Street, and he has Texas Chainsaw Massacre, And his mission has been, should you accept it, Michael, his mission is that he needs to reboot these franchises. And some of it's more successful than others. Some of it was premature. I don't dislike the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. I just think it was premature. Because Hollywood, in its great wisdom, had just released a box set Blu-ray, digitally remastered set of all 7 of my films. And I got a whole new audience of young kids who went to their divorced dad's house on Sunday and got to watch Freddy vs. Jason on a 52-inch flat screen in the man cave, and it looked pretty goddamn good. Next thing you know, it's Rooney Mara walking around kind of gloomy. It was just too soon. It was just premature. So I would have loved to have done the prequel. Actors never do remakes. You might see Danny Glover and Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 15, but you're never going to see them in Lethal Weapon 1 again. And you'll never see me in Nightmare on Elm Street 1 again. Would I love to be the old dream expert in the remake of Nightmare 3, with my beard, playing some old wizened guy at UCLA that confronts some nubile teenage girl about her nightmares? Yes, of course. And I love that. I love that aspect of cameo, because that's a great ingredient in the world of horror, in science fiction and fantasy. But no, I'm too old. If they want to reboot the franchise, I can't get out of bed on a Monday after doing stunts anymore. I'm like an NFL player. I can only take 4 hits to the left, and it's like, I need some peach. I need some peach juice, Nick. Please. I need an enema.
Any volunteers?
Yes.
Any other more questions here? I'm sure they're right there.
How did you get into acting?
What?
I read an article today that or not Bruce Campbell has a show, Actors Evil Dead, and he said that he was like doing guests on there.
This is his new.
Ash versus Evil Dead on the Stars.
Oh God, I'd go anywhere for Bruce Campbell. I had this fantasy when it was supposed to be, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. That the poster was like Bruce, with 300 washboard abs, and you know how they did those, right, you guys? That was synthetic. But Bruce would be standing there, with like abs, and like no hair below his belly button and the Trail of Paradise, and looking really good. And he'd have me in a headlock and Jason in a headlock, and he'd say, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, keeping the world safe from sequels.
I think we got time for a couple more, right? Yeah. Okay. Up above, the shouter.
How did you get into acting?
Girls. I'd love to say, I'm sitting with such an erudite guy here, and after years of working, there's a moment when culture and art and world cinema and world theater kick in, and you really do, become kind of smart and wise. But I was 12 years old and prematurely short, and my mother's best friend, her daughter, had legs that started right under her areolas, and she was 14, and she was dating a 17-year-old, and she was a wannabe actress in the Valley, gorgeous Valley girl, and I got assigned to her one summer to keep her out of trouble because of the older boys. I was sort of made, they had to she'd kind of babysit me. I was like, almost like a chaperone. And she was in a professional children's theater. And I got dragged along, and I thought that I would be sweeping, the stage and building scenery, and perhaps I'd be an usher. I wound up playing Aladdin, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, and I lost my virginity. And my memory was being in a girl's bathroom at the age of 12 and a half, sitting around with 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. And I had long hair. Nobody had long hair then. And they were putting those spoolies, the curlers in my hair, for Aladdin. And they were spraying my hair black for Aladdin. I was like albino blonde then. And the girls were teaching me how to blow smoke rings and do a French exhale, which is a real sexy way of smoking. And I think it was either West Side Story or Gypsy was playing on the phonograph, you know, which sounds a little gay, but it was actually pretty cool because it was all girls. It was all girls, and they were the harem girls from Aladdin, and they were all wearing Playtex living bras, which, you know, by today's standards aren't sexy at all, but back then they were amazing, and they had those tubes of glitter. They were gluing glitter on their brassieres and teaching me how to blow smoke rings, and we were listening to I know a boat you can get down in America, yeah. When you're a jet all the way from the first cigarette. So we're listening to this on the record player, and I'm learning how to smoke, and they're putting spoolies in my hair, and I've got a tit in this ear, and I've got a tit in this ear. And they're hard with those Playtex living bras on, and they're putting the thing on. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, I'm a big sissy. Yeah, I love this shit. I didn't tell anybody. Because at the same time, I was a jock. And I was a champion swimmer. And
Okay, two more. Right here.
Trying to be as unbiased as possible, do you think Freddy is, you know, the pinnacle of horror movie icons, and do you think anyone will ever transcend them in terms of longevity and just icon status?
oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, Freddy's got his foot in the door, but, you know, let's talk here. I didn't watch TV for years. I'm a must-see guy now. I can't keep away from Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal. Come on. And that show, that's network, that's not cable. This is network television. It's turned completely, the last 4 episodes of the last season were almost completely visual. It was like watching a kaleidoscope. It was like, it was like a hallucinating visual. It was so phenomenal. The subtext is so strong on that show. Mads had to top Anthony Hopkins. Do you know how the degree of difficulty? That's the degree of difficulty. And he completely made it his own. That's an extraordinary character. Come on, nobody can touch Karloff. Ever. Nobody can touch Karloff. Jason, I don't know. Not much personality. No, but you guys know there's a lot of great horror characters over the years. You know, my particular favorite right now is Mads, but I am also a huge fan, and I think you guys all need, if you haven't really clicked in, you need to revisit Penny Dreadful. Because the writing on that show, the writing alone on that show, let alone you get to see Eva Green's boobies. and Billy Piper's boobies. But, and her Bride of Frankenstein has just come so far. By the way, I predicted that. Check out my tweets if you don't believe me. But yeah, that's an extraordinary show. Really an extraordinary show. And you know, we're all trying to be modern now, and you know, Mick and I are trying to keep up with this. And Mick and I have been in too many meetings for too many times where they ask us, well, what is the tone, or is this a conflicting tone on this project? And you want to say, you know, what we know now, what Mick and I know now, is that you guys can come along with the new tone. And I think a lot of this has been from the graphic novels, but I don't think there's been a better mashup than Penny Dreadful. In terms of the mashup, the graphic novel mashup. So I encourage all of you to see it, yeah.
Horror as Shakespeare.
It is.
Okay, one last.
The last question.
Bitch. Okay, this arm is going way up.
Actually, this does have to do with the personality of the moments ago. I think in terms of modern horror history, Freddy was possibly the very first character to really have a quote-unquote personality that also gave birth, that also helped give birth to
Candyman was just around the same time, yeah.
But also, I remember, like, from growing up watching back on movies as well, and listening to certain, like, positive criticism about it. Some people kind of felt this as a serious progress if Freddy went from being sinister to being a little too funny. But speaking as a man who's been Freddy the most in everybody's eyes, would you say that there is a possibility of the argument that because Freddy became more quote-unquote funny, that is actually what makes him more terrifying, that he's able to take such really dark moments in the last few minutes of his victims' lives and really just put them through the ringer using their
Okay,
Well,
our
that's
last question.
No, Freddy, you know, Wes isn't here to defend himself, but if you watch Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, I crack wise in that many times. I make a lot of jokes, and I cut my fingers off, and I joke, I stick my tongue out of a telephone, I eviscerate a young lady, put her face on an impersonator. I'm kidding around. That's all Wes. And Part 3, Wes is a huge contributor to Part 3. We went to, did we jump the shark? Perhaps in Part 6, but we did it intentionally. That was our way of being part of the culture at that time. And so we referenced Roseanne Barr, and we referenced Alice Cooper. However, you know, symbolically, we still did. Here's the thing about the sense of humor. I would get a line of dialogue from the writers, and these are the guys that wrote Shawshank Redemption, for Christ's sake, you guys. These are really good writers. Brian Hegelman. These are the real guys that are writing these movies back then. Check out our cast and crew on these movies. They're running Hollywood now. At any rate, the point being that what would happen sometimes is, at the end of a scene, they would give me a joke, or a dark quip, a kind of Dirty Harry line, kind of make my day line. And I would do it with and without that line. When they were rushing production, in post-production sometimes, I think the editors relied on my jokes or my one-liners as a kind of cinematic rim shot, editorially, to button up a scene. It's something they were up against the wall with time to do it. It was the easiest way for them to make a scene work if they ended on one of my jokes. I remember in Part 4, the Rennie Harlan film, Freddy's Revenge, I remember I killed Kenny Sagos really darkly. I gutted him and I kissed him like Al Pacino, and he fell down my body. And then they made me do it with a joke. And I saw the one where I just kissed him like Al Pacino, and he just fell down my body. And it was great, because he'd been in Part 3 as well, and it was great. It was like his finish. And I thought I should go dark. And, you know, if I had it to do over again, I would, you know, send those notes off every day with the, you know, the continuity girl and the director and say, you know, I really think that the silent tape, that this particular moment needs to be a little darker. But the audiences loved the humor, and that's why when we responded to the fans, we responded to you guys. And I think that Wes's idea about the joke is that when you let an audience laugh in a horror movie, and you can control that laugh, it's easier to set them up again to be scared. If you watch a really great scary film that's just scary, there comes a moment when you have so much tension watching it, and you're so uncomfortable watching it, that you might laugh at it as opposed to with it. And you never want that to happen, because then you lose your audience. This has happened to me on stage before, when I was a young actor. So you want the audience to laugh with you, not at you. And so it's better for us to call the joke than to let you guys just get so afraid or so tense or so cathartic in a horror movie that you have to start mocking it, self-referentially or however. And I've been in some pretty cool self-referential movies, whether it's my most recent movie, Last Showing, whether it's you know, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. I've been in some cool self-referential movies. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is very meta. But there's what the point of that, and Wes taught me this, the point of that is you release the tension. And you can do it visually, you can do it with a joke, you can do it with music, but you release that tension, and then you can sneak up and surprise the audience again. I think that's our last question. Thank you.